I'm still trembling. 20 minutes earlier, 2 officers knocked and snapped on handcuffs. You're under arrest. My stomach plunges. Arrested for what? I step back, hands shaking, when Sandra appears. My wife, the woman who watches baking shows and wears pajamas every night. She glances at their badges and something crosses her face. Gentlemen, step away from my husband, she says, voice cold and commanding, a tone I don't recognize. One officer grips my arm. Sandra moves. Everything blurs. I hear thuds, yelling, then an eerie quiet. When I look up, I can't quite put into words what I see. All I know is the woman in our doorway isn't the one I married. Comment. Ever felt like you didn't really know someone? The deck was flawless. $8,000 of cedar, built to HOA specs. I surprised Sandra for our 12th anniversary. I hired Michael Carter, the contractor everyone in Maple Ridge recommended, and watched him spend 3 weeks creating what I thought would be our backyard haven. Sandra came home from work that Friday, dropped her briefcase, and just stood there. Josh, she breathed, stepping onto the smooth boards barefoot. This is really something. The neighbors came over that weekend for a barbecue. Mrs. Patricia Wilson next door brought her famous potato salad, and even the Johnsons from across the street showed up, which never happens. Everyone praised the workmanship, the clean lines, how perfectly it fit our corner lot. But Sandra kept checking her phone, which felt odd. She smiled at compliments and nodded at the right moments, but her fingers kept flicking over the screen like she was conducting an invisible orchestra. Then the violation notice arrived Monday morning. $200 per day, effective immediately, for unauthorized construction exceeding maximum deck height by 6 inches. I read it 3 times. 6 inches. Michael had measured twice, shown me blueprints, and gotten Teresa Edwards, our HOA president, to sign preliminary plans. I called at once. Josh, man, that's impossible, he said, genuinely baffled. I built to the exact specs. Teresa approved everything. He promised to bring his original measurements, permits, everything. Sandra's reaction was the strangest. She barely glanced up from her laptop. Just tear it down and rebuild, she said, like we're deciding on takeout. Not worth fighting Teresa over 6 inches. Trust me. Trust her. The same woman who'd spent 3 weeks faking surprise about a deck I'd planned for months. Yeah, something's definitely wrong here. Mrs. Wilson saw someone measuring the deck that afternoon. 3 families, Sandra said quietly, peering over the fence. 3 families left Maple Ridge after building additions. They all used the same contractor. She wouldn't say more, patted my arm, and drifted inside. The same contractor, Michael? That made no sense. The guy had 5-star reviews, lived here 6 years, coached Little League. That night Sandra was working late again, the 3rd time that week, hunched over files on the dining table. Mrs. Wilson's just lonely, she said without looking up. She sees conspiracies everywhere. Remember when she thought the mail carrier was casing houses? Except Mrs. Wilson had been right about that one. The mail carrier was arrested for theft 3 months later. I was about to say something when I noticed Sandra's documents. Not the usual Social Security forms. These had photos, timestamps, handwritten notes about meeting patterns and financial transfers. Before I could ask, she swept everything in her briefcase. I couldn't sleep that night. Sandra's casualness, Mrs. Wilson's warning, Teresa's sudden enforcement of a tiny height rule. It all felt staged. At 2 a.m., I got up for water and noticed Sandra's keys and purse were gone. The bedroom door open, the bed empty. My phone read, 2:17 a.m. Where does a Social Security claims processor go at that hour? I looked out the window just in time to see our BMW's taillights fade down Maple Ridge Drive. My stomach dropped. 12 years married, and I'd never doubted Sandra. Sure, odd hours, a conference call now and then. But sneaking out at night? I lay awake until dawn, replaying every late evening, every time she'd been too tired to talk. When she slipped in at 4:30 a.m., I pretended to be asleep. She smelled of coffee and a floral perfume I didn't recognize. Michael came the next morning with blueprints and a tape measure. I don't get it, he kept saying, rechecking the deck height. This is exactly 36 inches, the maximum allowable height. Exactly. Teresa's notice said 30 inches. Legal max was 38. She's lying, I said. Michael looked uneasy. Josh, Teresa lost her husband in a construction accident 2 years ago. She's overly protective about codes. Maybe she misread the measurements. The woman had approved 3 pools, 2 garage conversions, and the Hendersons' monstrous gazebo last year. Why single out my simple deck? Then Michael pulled something that made my blood run cold. A folder with paperwork from his last 3 Maple Ridge jobs. The Rodriguez's on Oak, the Patels on Birch, the Kowalskis on Elm. All corner lots, all got violation notices, all eventually sold. I thought it was coincidence, he said quietly. 3 and 18 months, now you. The pattern was unnerving. That afternoon, Sandra came home early, which never happened. She stood on the deck a long minute, then turned to me with a strange expression. Tear it down this weekend, she ordered. I'll help. We'll rebuild it shorter. Whatever Teresa wants. My wife, who had argued with the HOA over mailbox color for months, wanted to surrender over 6 phantom inches. No, I said. We're fighting this. Something flickered over her face. Was it fear? Pride? I couldn't tell. She started to speak. Josh. Then her phone buzzed. She tensed, said, I need to make a call, and disappeared into the garage. I watched her pace and gesture on the phone, then come back with a different air. Do what you want about the deck, she said. I've got work to do. She locked herself in the home office the rest of the night. Fear makes you do stupid things. I checked Sandra's car mileage, 300 miles more than the prior week. Our town is only 15 miles across. I scanned credit card statements, hotels in different cities during her supposed office hours, receipts in the console for coffee shops I'd never heard of, gas stations 50 miles away, even a purchase from a surveillance equipment store. Surveillance. My wife, a disability claims processor, buying surveillance gear. I sat in the garage, surrounded by evidence of a life I didn't recognize and tried to make sense of it. When I really thought about it, Sandra had been off for months. Late nights, strange calls, flinches when I walked in. I blamed government job stress. But what if it wasn't work? What if Teresa's violation, Michael's paperwork, Mrs. Wilson's tip were connected to whatever Sandra was hiding? And worse, what if she was working with them? I followed her at 2 a.m., like some desperate extra in a bad movie. She left the bed at 1:45, dressed in the dark, and drove without lights until the end of our street. I took my truck, stayed 3 cars back, and felt ridiculous. What was I hoping to find? She drove to the industrial park on Route 7, parked in a vacant office lot, and sat. 10 minutes later, another car pulled up. A man in his 50s, gray hair, expensive suit stepped out. They spoke through rolled-down windows for 5 minutes. Then a third car arrived, a younger woman, early 30s, crying. Through binoculars, I watched Sandra hand tissues, pat the woman's shoulder, and jot in a notebook. The whole scene lasted 20 minutes. Then everyone left in different directions. Not an affair, not a routine counseling session either. Not what you'd expect from a Social Security worker. Morning came too fast. Sandra was up, dressed, making coffee as if nothing had happened. Sleep well? She asked without looking at me. Fine, I lied. You? She smiled. Like the dead. That phrase stuck. I swallowed anger and fear and asked, What time did you get home last night? She flinched for a heartbeat, then said calmly, I didn't go anywhere. You must have dreamed it. Gaslighting. My wife was denying something I'd seen with my own eyes. I said, my mistake. She kissed my cheek perfunctorily and left for work. 30 seconds later, Michael texted, Can I stop by? It's important. He came in looking exhausted. Josh, I need to show you something, he said, pulling out his phone. I got an email last night from your wife. The sender was sandra.roberts.net, an official-looking domain. The message, proceed with original deck specifications. Standard bonus applies upon violation notice. TR. My stomach lurched. TR. Teresa Richards? No, Teresa Edwards. Unless this doesn't make sense, I said. Michael cut in. That's not all. He cross-checked his records. For his last 3 jobs, he got similar emails from slightly different addresses, always variations of your wife's name. S. Roberts, Sandra R. Even Roberts HOA. He looked miserable. Josh, I think your wife has been setting people up, including you. I reeled. How much? I asked quietly. How much did she pay you? Michael looked ashamed. 500 per job. But Josh, I swear I thought it was legit. Some quality control thing. Later that day, Teresa invited me over for coffee. Just neighbors chatting, she'd said. Her house immaculately staged. No photos of a dead husband, no memorials, nothing personal. She poured expensive-looking coffee into bone china cups and told me, voice cracking perfectly, that her husband died in a construction accident. The platform gave way and he fell 3 stories. I write violations because I don't want another family to suffer, she said, touching my hand. The deck is beautiful, Josh. But those 6 inches matter for weight distribution, for safety. I'm just trying to protect you. I almost believed her. Almost. Then I noticed her manicure. Fresh, costly, with tiny diamonds. Odd for a grieving widow on a fixed income. The coffee label, $70 a pound. My Social Security, processing wife couldn't afford that. Back at home, I found a bank statement on my desk. Sandra's private account I'd never known. Deposits of $3,500 every 2 weeks from DMK Legal Services. Legal Services? My wife worked for Social Security. Why would a law firm be paying her? I photographed everything and dug deeper. The deposits went back 6 months. The same amount, same source. $72,000 in half a year, tax-free, hidden. I felt sick. Beside the statement was a burner phone I'd never seen. Recent calls to unknown numbers. Text SIN code. Package delivered to target 3. Surveillance confirms pattern. Subject unaware. Proceeding to phase 2. Was I the subject? Was our house the target? I heard Sandra's car and shoved everything back. She walked in, saw my face and froze. What's wrong? She asked carefully. Everything. I wanted to scream. Everything is wrong. I said nothing. Just tired. She studied me, nodded slowly. I'm going out tonight, she announced. Client emergency at Social Security at 7 p.m. might be late. While she showered, I installed a hidden camera, a tiny button-sized thing on the bookshelf facing the living room. If she was lying, I needed proof. The camera recorded Sandra coming downstairs dressed all in black. Tactical pants, dark jacket, running shoes instead of heels. She packed equipment, a backpack, laptop, what looked like a professional camera with a long lens, multiple phones, and something I couldn't identify. Don't wait up, she called and left. I tracked her on my phone, then reviewed earlier footage. At lunchtime, she'd come home. Unheard of, spent 30 minutes photographing our deck from every angle, measuring with a laser, writing in a leather notebook. She even climbed onto the roof for overhead shots. This was documentation, professional grade. For what? For whom? Midnight, Michael called. Josh, I need to tell you something else. His voice shook. Teresa's not who she says she is. He'd found no record of a husband dying in a construction accident. No obituary, no accident report. Nothing in insurance records. The pieces were rearranging into a picture I didn't want to see. Then who is she? I asked. Michael hesitated. I don't know, but your wife does. I saw them having lunch last week. Friendly, familiar. I think we're both being played. I hung up and watched the live feed. Empty living room. Empty house. Sandra was out there doing whatever it was, with people I couldn't trust, and I sat in the dark wondering how my ordinary life had become this nightmare. Wondering if I'd ever truly known the woman I'd married. The Sunset Motel on Highway 9 is the sort of place you'd never choose. Peeling paint, a humming neon sign. I watched Sandra's BMW pull in at 1 a.m. on a Wednesday. She told me she was sick that day. She went to room 218, knocked 3 times in a pattern, and went inside. I gave it 10 minutes, then crept closer. Through thin curtains, I saw 2 figures. Sandra and a middle-aged woman on the bed. The woman was weeping, Sandra taking notes, and every few minutes Sandra would show her phone. The woman would nod. After 40 minutes they hugged, long and intense, and Sandra left. The woman remained, staring at nothing that I walked up to her door and knocked gently. She opened it with eyes red and a guarded expression. Who are you? She asked. Josh Roberts. I'm Sandra's husband. Before I could finish, she slammed the door. Through the trees, I heard her sobbing louder. Michael met me at the diner with his theory, spreading papers across the table. Your wife is running both sides, he said. Look at this. She engineers the violation through me. I get paid. Then she counsels the victims, tells them to fight, hires lawyers, drags things out while Teresa pressures them to sell. She profits from a scam and from helping people resist it. He showed bank records, payments to Sandra from that same source, DMK Legal Services, while his statements showed outgoing withdrawals. It's a shell company, Michael insisted. They're laundering money through it. Your wife, Teresa, maybe others. This is organized. I wanted to argue, to defend Sandra, but the proof was crushing. Either she was a criminal genius or an incredible liar. Maybe both. That night, I found more business cards in Sandra's car. Not one identity, but 6. Different names, different firms, each with her photo. Sarah Rollins, insurance investigator. Sandra, legal consultant. S.R. Thompson, property assessor. Each card looked used, legit. Who was this woman? I'd married Sandra Roberts, a quiet government worker who liked true crime podcasts and hated cilantro. Now I lived with a ghost, a chameleon who could be anyone. When she came home, I confronted her, throwing the cards on the table. She went pale, then flushed, then hardened. You went through my car, she said, not denying it, only furious that I'd found her. 12 years of marriage, and you break into my things. She accused me, laughed at the absurdity. A scam? You think I'm... She cut herself off, snatched her keys, and said she needed space. An hour later, Teresa appeared at my door, all sweetness. Is everything okay? She asked. I almost told her everything. Sandra's double life, the motel meetings, the payments. But something in Teresa's eyes stopped me. Too eager, too pleased. I lied. We're fine. She lingered, fishing, then showed me screenshots on her phone, texts between Sandra and Teresa about filing fraudulent violations, splitting profits, and picking targets. Sandra, file the violation tomorrow. Teresa, but the measurements are legal. Sandra, running some kind of scam. I opened my laptop to email a divorce lawyer when a notification popped up, an anonymous encrypted file. Inside was a USB-sized trove, an investigator's dossier, Edward's real estate fraud investigation, video testimonies from 6 families, property transfer records, an 18-month timeline, photos of Teresa at closings, smiling Teresa, not grieving Teresa, celebrating sales, buying rental property. The final file was a recording. This is victim 4. Sandra Roberts helped me understand what happened. Teresa Edwards forced us out using fake violations. The contractor, Michael Carter, wasn't on it. They made $70,000 off our house. Another voice, victim 2. We lost everything. Sandra said she's building a case, gathering evidence for a lawsuit. She's the only one who believed us. 6 families, 6 testimonies, all naming Teresa and Michael. No one accused Sandra. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Emergency. Sandra just broke into my work van. Threatened me. Meet at my office now. I have security footage. Come alone. My heart hammered. Security footage of Sandra threatening someone would be damning. I grabbed my keys and ran. Meanwhile, a final file on my computer opened by itself. A video of Sandra speaking straight to camera. If you're watching this, Josh, I'm sorry for everything, but don't trust Michael. Don't meet him alone. He's the file cut off. I drove anyway. Michael's office sat above his garage, a cramped workspace. He greeted me at the door. Thank God you came, he said, ushering me in to view his footage. The grainy clip showed someone in Sandra's jacket near his van. It looked staged. This isn't real, I said. Michael's face shifted. You're smarter than I thought, he said, reaching into his desk. He pulled out a gun. Sorry, Josh. This was supposed to be clean. Quick sale. Everyone moves on. But you had to dig. My blood ran cold. Make something up. He'll pay anything to avoid court. My knees buckled. Teresa clutched my arm. I'm so sorry, she whispered. She's been blackmailing me for months. I didn't know what else to do. She threatened to report my husband's accident as fraud. Sandra checked into the downtown Marriott and called it a separation until I trusted her again. The irony bitterly amused me. I sat alone, watching the hidden camera footage of Sandra documenting the deck, scrolling bank statements showing the payments, replaying the motel meeting where she comforted a crying woman. Michael's hypothesis fit on paper. Sandra running both sides of a real estate scam, profiting from chaos she created. But the weeping woman and Sandra's tenderness looked real, unless that too was staged. Could professionals fake grief? Probably. Our plan, he said, smiling. 3 years. 6 houses. $400,000 each. You were supposed to be number 7. He motioned to the window. A police scanner crackled. Domestic disturbance at your address. Crazy husband threatens contractor. Tragic shooting. Self-defense. The doorbell thundered. Michael kept the gun leveled at me, hand trembling. Footsteps approached. Open up, I said through the peephole. I saw 2 officers, but their badges looked off, too shiny. Rental cops, fake cops. Then I heard a voice. Police. We have a warrant for Joshua Roberts. Sandra's voice, authoritative. Arrest for HOA violations, threatening behavior. This was madness. I yanked the door open. These are fake cops. I shouted, but the men forced their way in. Michael said, subject is delusional, and urged them to use force. Tony, the taller one, grabbed my arm. Sandra appeared behind them in a bathrobe, furious. Gentlemen, she said quietly, you're committing felony fraud. Step aside. Rick laughed. Tony reached for Sandra. In 3 seconds she twisted, and Tony was face down on Michael's porch, his phony badge skittering away. Rick fled. Michael lunged for the drawer. Sandra kicked it closed on his fingers. She recorded everything, pointing her phone on the railing, including me pulling a gun on her husband. Car door slammed. This time real police showed up. 3 squad cars, lights flashing. A silver sedan rolled to a stop. A man in an expensive suit introduced himself as David Walker, an attorney representing 6 defrauded families. He said Sandra had been his investigator for 4 months. We sat in Michael's office, now a crime scene. David produced ID, bar card, and civil suit documents. Teresa targeted corner lots for high resale value. Michael manufactured violations through contractor access. They pressured families to sell cheap. Teresa flipped properties for huge profit. Classic scheme. David explained Sandra had instructed Michael to build to exact code, then documented Teresa's attempts. He'd recommended Michael to me through fake online reviews to get him in the loop. The payments from DMK Legal? That was David M. Walker paying his investigator. The email Michael showed me, the one from Sandra telling him to create violations, was spoofed by Teresa to mislead Michael. Classic misdirection. Sandra appeared at the doorway, exhausted. Can I talk to Josh? She asked. The detective nodded, and everyone filed out. Left alone where Michael had almost killed me, I said, you made me the bait. For 4 months you let me believe you were having an affair. Let me doubt everything. All to catch Teresa. Sandra sank into Michael's chair. I want to tell you every day, she said. But victims die in these cases. Witnesses disappear. I couldn't risk what? That I'd tell someone? Protect you. Her voice broke. You installed cameras. You followed me. You went through my private files. We both had betrayed each other. Outside, they loaded Michael into a squad car. Teresa had been arrested at home, apparently trying to flee with a suitcase of cash. The fake cops were being questioned, already turning on each other. The USB drive, Sandra asked softly. Did you open the last file? My video. I shook my head. She showed me the whole recording, urgent, afraid. If you're watching this, Josh, I'm sorry. But don't trust Michael. Don't meet him anywhere alone. He's dangerous and desperate. If he thinks you know too much, she'd filmed it an hour before Michael's emergency text. She'd known. She'd come to save me. How did you know about the fake cops? I asked. She gave a tired smile. I told Teresa about them. Said they'd been security I'd hired to intimidate you if you didn't cooperate with the deck teardown. Teresa bit. Hired the same guys for her own plan. I flipped it on her. She'd sown the Yelp review recommending Michael, nudged you to hire him, manipulated the whole thing. The admission hung in the air. She'd used our anniversary, our home, our marriage as tools in her investigation. Was any of it real? I whispered. Sandra's eyes glistened. All of it, except the lies. Which parts were lies and which were true? We couldn't tell. David knocked on the frame. Sandra, we need your statement downtown. Josh, you too, witness and victim. We rose, awkward and broken. 12 years of trust shredded by 4 months of deception and necessary subterfuge. As we left, her with David, me with a detective, she mouthed, I'm sorry. I nodded. What else could I do? Sorry I hadn't fixed it. Sorry I hadn't rebuilt what we'd torn down. It was something. The detective held the car door. Hell of a wife you've got there, he said. I managed a bitter laugh. Hell of a wife indeed. The question lingered. Did I still have a wife, or a stranger who'd played a role in my life until the case was finally, terribly, completely closed? The detective interviewed me for 3 hours downtown, cataloging Michael's trap, the gun, the threats, his admission that I was supposed to be victim number 7. You're lucky your wife has such timing. Detective Barnes closed his notebook. 5 more minutes, and we'd be investigating a homicide instead of fraud. Lucky, right? I felt anything but fortunate. That's how it felt as I signed my statement and stepped into the station's unforgiving fluorescent glare. Sandra was still being questioned, her true profession finally laid bare. Through the glass wall, I watched her analyze crime scene photos with calm precision, pointing out evidence with an expertise I never realized she had. David Walker joined me in the waiting area. She really is the best, he said, following my eyes. Half a year ago, I represented a single client. Now I'm handling cases for 12 families, with more reaching out daily. Sandra uncovered a whole network while I was busy thinking she was having an affair. The fake cops, I blurted. Who were they really? David scrolled his phone. Tony and Rick Sullivan. Struggling actors Teresa found on a casting site. Promised them $500 for half an hour of performance art. They thought it was for some prank video online. He shook his head. Once Sandra revealed she was a PI and showed her recording gear, Rick bolted. Tony was stupid enough to try to grab her, thinking he could salvage the scene. I remembered watching Tony crash against the porch. Sandra's movements, so sharp and professional. She trains, David added with a faint smile. Black belt in 3 different disciplines. Mandatory after a stalker case went bad 5 years ago. Before you. Before me. There was so much about Sandra I'd never known. The investigation, I asked. Was it worth it? Tearing apart our marriage over a fraud case. David's face hardened. The Johnsons lost their retirement house. The Patels split up under financial strain. The Rodriguez's daughter had to drop out of college. Worth it? Ask them. About an hour later, they marched Teresa in handcuffs. She tried to escape through her backyard with $300,000 in cash, property deeds, and a burner phone holding Michael's confession. Insurance. According to the detective, she'd been recording him from the very beginning in case things collapsed. Career criminals, both of them. As she was led past, Teresa's eyes locked on mine. Gone was the grieving widow act, gone the neighborly concern. What remained was cold calculation. Your wife's smarter than you, she hissed as guards tugged her forward. Smarter than all of us. Don't forget that. The cell door slammed shut behind her. Sandra emerged soon after, drained. They need me back tomorrow for Michael's arraignment, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I'll stay at the Marriott again tonight. Give us both time to process. Process. Like this was paperwork instead of the wreckage of our marriage. Did you really think I was cheating? She asked softly that I hesitated. Outside, the city buzzed with ordinary people living ordinary lives, not questioning if their partner was a criminal, a hero, or something in between. Yes, I finally admitted. Every sign pointed that way. The late nights, the secret phones, the hidden meetings. What else could I think? Sandra nodded slowly. And I thought you trusted me. 12 years. I thought we were solid enough that you'd wait for an explanation instead of wiring the house. We were both right. We were both wrong. The elevator chimed, and David stepped out with a young woman. I recognized her, the crying victim from the motel. Mrs. Peterson wanted to see you, David said. She approached hesitantly. Your wife saved my family, she said, tears forming again. Teresa and Michael ruined us, and Sandra was the only one who believed, who documented everything, who found the other victims. Who built the case? She clutched Sandra's hands. You're a hero. Both of you. If you hadn't pushed through this investigation, Teresa would still be destroying lives. Sandra squeezed her hands back, her professional mask slipping just a fraction. This was why she did it. Not for recognition or money, but for people like Mrs. Peterson, who had nowhere else to go. Michael's arraignment was set for the next morning, but that night his lawyer showed up with a deal. Full cooperation for reduced charges. Detective Barnes explained he was ready to testify against Teresa, hand over financial records, and identify more victims in nearby towns. Nearby towns. Bigger than Maple Ridge. How many houses? I asked. Barnes checked his notes. So far, 19 properties over 3 years. Estimated profit exceeds $2 million. $2 million. And I've been losing sleep over $8,000 for a deck. Sandra appeared beside me, smelling of burned coffee and exhaustion. Michael's lawyer wants a meet, she said quietly. Thinks he could get the sentence down to 18 months if we back the plea. Like we were still partners. I really looked at her then, for the first time since this nightmare began. The dark smudges under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way she rubbed her wrist where Tony had grabbed her. My wife, the stranger, the hero, the liar. All one person. What do you think? I asked. Sandra blinked, surprised I'd asked. I think justice matters more than vengeance. If Michael helps us find every victim, secures restitution, and exposes others involved, that's worth more than watching him rot. But it's your call too. He threatened you, nearly killed you. You have the right to want maximum punishment. This was new ground for us. Once we debated paint colors, vacation spots, whether to have kids. Now, we weighed criminal plea deals like adversaries at a boardroom table. I want Teresa to pay, I said finally. If Michael helps make that happen, I can live with him serving less time. Sandra nodded, relief flickering across her face. I'll tell David. As she left, Detective Barnes cleared his throat. For what it's worth, your wife never removed her wedding ring. Not undercover, not when she pretended to be someone else. That ring stayed. I looked at my own hand. I'd stripped mine off 3 days ago, the moment I convinced myself Sandra was corrupt. It was still in my pocket, a small gold band carrying 12 years of history. At dawn, the media descended. News vans, reporters, even a buzzing drone overhead. Massive HOA fraud exposed. The headlines wrote themselves. Sandra's name, her profession, her face, all of it now public. How do you feel about your wife's secret life? A reporter shouted as I fought toward my car. How did I feel? Betrayed. Proud. Furious. Grateful. Confused. Shattered. All of it at once. No comment. I managed shoving past. My phone vibrated. Sandra, sorry about the press. I didn't expect them to find you. If you need a quiet place, use my office key. Code's our anniversary. Our anniversary. The same date I'd once celebrated by building a deck. The same deck that had blown open corruption and wrecked our marriage. The irony wasn't lost. I drove to her office instead of home. The space was smaller than I'd imagined. Clean. Professional. Files arranged by color. A wall of surveillance gear and victim photos, me included, connected with red string. This was Sandra's real world. A world I'd never been part of. On her desk sat a framed picture I'd never seen. Us on our wedding day 12 years back, laughing at some joke for the photographer. Sandra looked so young, so sure of herself. I held it, trying to reconcile that hopeful bride with the woman who had built an investigation on the foundation of our anniversary. The door opened. Sandra walked in with 2 coffees from the same place she always slipped off to at 2 a.m. Thought you'd need this, she said softly, setting one down. She noticed me holding the photo. I keep it there to remind myself, why do this? Why the lying, the danger, the pressure is worth it. To protect families. To protect what ours used to be. Used to be. Past tense. The words hung in the air. Outside, the city stirred with headlines of Teresa's arrest, Michael's cooperation, justice delivered. Inside, 2 people who once promised forever stood in the ruins of that promise. Holding coffee and broken trust, wondering if anything could be rebuilt. Amid the ruins of broken promises, I sat clutching my coffee and the shattered pieces of trust, wondering if anything could rise from what was lost. I have to testify at Michael's arraignment in 2 hours, Sandra said, glancing at her watch. The same one I'd given her on our 10th anniversary. She'd worn it through the entire investigation, even while pretending to be someone else. I know, I answered quietly. I'll be there as a witness, not as I couldn't finish. Not as her husband, not as her partner, not as anything at all. She nodded, understanding what I left unsaid. At the door, I stopped her. Sandra. She turned. Yeah. That video on the USB. Did you mean it? Her smile was tinged with sadness. Every word. Especially the part about loving you. I should have said it more often. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me with cold coffee and the echo of what felt like a farewell. The courthouse overflowed. Every family Teresa and Michael had sat shoulder to shoulder with neighbors, reporters, and curious locals who'd seen the morning headlines. I chose the third row, close enough to watch, far enough to protect myself. Sandra sat with David Walker at the prosecutor's table, her investigator badge visible, her usual casual look replaced by a crisp navy suit, hair tied back, every inch the professional who dismantled a criminal empire. Teresa's attorney, slick and polished, argued entrapment. My client was tricked by an investigator who fabricated situations and lured honest citizens into crimes. The prosecutor, Ellen Santos, raised an eyebrow. Your client hired actors to impersonate officers, pointed guns, and made death threats. Which part of that was entrapment? Michael entered in an orange jumpsuit. Nothing like the friendly contractor who coached Little League and built decks. His lawyer had worked a deal, cooperation for leniency. Your Honor, the defense began, my client is ready to allocate and assist the prosecution. Judge Morrison, stern and gray-haired, peered over her glasses. Mr. Clark, you understand you're giving up trial by admitting these charges? Michael nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I want to tell the truth. For 3 hours, he painted Teresa as mastermind and himself as reluctant accomplice. He explained how, for years earlier, she'd pitched the scheme. She'd identify corner homes owned by financially strained families, and he'd fabricate violations. She said we were just improving the market, Michael testified. Removing families who couldn't keep up, making room for better ones. Better meaning richer, whiter, more obedient to Teresa's vision of Maple Ridge. After lunch, victims spoke. Mrs. Rodriguez trembled as she told her story. We saved 15 years for that house, our dream. Then came endless violations, garage, deck, fence. Month after month, new fines we couldn't afford. We sold for $100,000 below value. Teresa bought it through an LLC and flipped it for $200,000 profit. That was our retirement. Our daughter's college. Our future. 6 other families echoed the same. The Johnsons' marriage collapsed. The Patel's sons' medical bills went unpaid. The Kowalskis went bankrupt. Lives destroyed under the guise of community improvement. When Sandra testified, silence fell. Attorney Walker retained me after multiple families reported harassment leading to forced sales, she explained. Investigative procedure confirmed a coordinated fraud scheme. Teresa's lawyer pounced. Isn't it true, Ms. Roberts, that you deceived even your husband for months? Sandra's jaw tightened. I maintained cover to protect witnesses and evidence. You manipulated him, staged scenarios, and let him believe you were unfaithful. Standard procedure. Her hands clenched. My private life doesn't alter the facts. Teresa preyed on families long before I arrived. But the damage was done. In the hallway, Mrs. Wilson approached me. I tried to warn you. Saw 3 families ruined before yours. Nobody believed me until Sandra stepped in. She touched my arm. She's a good woman. She saved us. Don't forget that when you're angry about the lies. Easy words for her. She hadn't watched her marriage unravel. Sentencing came fast. Teresa, 5 years in county jail, restitution of $480,000, and a permanent HOA ban. You corrupted community, Judge Morrison declared. You preyed on families, destroyed lives, and lined your pockets. Teresa stayed cold, only reacting when the bailiff cuffed her. She turned to Sandra and mouthed, "This isn't over," screaming about appeals as she was dragged out. Michael got 3 years with credit for cooperation. Not the architect, the judge said, but a willing profiteer. The fake cops, Tony and Rick, earned probation and community service. Foolish choices, the judge told them. But fraud is still fraud. As people filed out, Walker addressed his team. Civil trials next. We'll seize Teresa's assets, properties, accounts, everything. Full restitution plus damages. He looked at me. That includes you, Josh. Your deck, emotional distress, the lot. Money. As if I could fix what broke. Sandra approached, her composure cracking. Can we talk? We slipped into a quiet room. For a long time, we just stared. I'm leaving investigative work, she said. After this case, I'm done. David offered me consulting, reforming HOA law, training investigators, desk job. No more undercover, no more lies. She was offering to change her life for me, for us. I'm sorry for the cameras, I admitted. Sorry for making you feel I didn't trust you. We both failed, she replied. You doubted me, assumed the worst. And I lied, even if it was for a case. I sighed. Where do we go from here? Sandra slid a manila folder across the table. Divorce papers, needing only signatures. Option 1. Or option 2, counseling. Total transparency. No secrets. We try to rebuild. She handed me a card. I booked us an appointment. You can cancel or show up. Your choice. I looked at the folder, then at the woman I loved and no longer knew. Outside, the sunset painted the courthouse gold. Inside, 12 years of marriage weighed against 4 months of lies. I'll think about it, I said. For what it's worth, she replied. I'd choose differently now. I'd risk the case, tell you everything, because losing you is worse than any criminal going free. She left before I could answer. I sat alone with papers and a card, knowing the choice ahead would shape my life. Justice had been served. Victims would be repaid. The neighborhood would heal. But us? That no court could decide. Dr. Patricia Morrison's office smelled of lavender and old books. Not the judge, different Morrison, same stern edge. Sandra sat at one end of the couch, me at the other, space like a canyon between us. So, the therapist asked, pen ready, why are you here? Silence. Finally, Sandra said, because I lied to my husband for 4 months. Because my wife used me as bait in a case. I added. Dr. Morrison arched a brow. Clear on each other's faults. What about your own? 6 weeks followed. Twice a week, we sat in that room, writing unsent letters, role-playing conversations, even physically arranging ourselves to show emotion. Sandra at the door, poised to run. Me behind a desk, defensive. You both faced betrayal, Dr. Morrison said in week 4. Different forms, same wound. Sandra, you chose justice over marriage. Josh, you chose suspicion over communication. The day after our first session, Sandra quit PI work. She refused 3 cases, ended her license, boxed her gear. Not worth losing you, she said, carrying boxes away. David Walker gave her a desk job instead. HOA reform, training, safer. 2 months later, I moved back into the guest room. Small steps, Dr. Morrison advised. Trust doesn't return overnight. We started with awkward dinners, small talk, TV from opposite couch ends, separate beds. Progress was slow, but visible. Sandra taught self-defense at the community center, and I showed up. Her book club learned her real past, and thought she was cooler for it. And one night, watching Teresa's prison interview, Sandra snorted. She hired fake cops. Entrapment? Please. The audacity, I said. We laughed. Really laughed. First time in months. Wilson won the HOA presidency on promises of openness and practicality. Her first moves were setting term limits and opening the books. The yearly HOA meeting transformed into deck day, barbecue, safety inspections, and retellings of the infamous 2024 HOA collapse. Support circles appeared. David Walker organized victims into a monthly group at the community center. Sometimes Sandra showed up, not as the investigator, but as one of us, a survivor. We all lost something, Mrs. Rodriguez said, but we gained each other. Sentimental, yes, but true. After 4 months in therapy, Dr. Morrison assigned us a task: total honesty. One secret, one fear, one hope. We gathered on the same deck where it had all begun. Sandra went first. I kept your anniversary receipt, knew about the deck long before, faked my surprise, then used it for the case. I've carried that guilt from day one. My turn. I almost filed for divorce. Paper sat in my car 3 times. Pride kept me from admitting I still loved you. That night, I brought pillows back to our bedroom. Nothing dramatic, just clean sheets and hours of late-night conversation. 6 months after the fake cops, we finally celebrated our anniversary properly. Dinner at the fancy Italian downtown. To survival, Sandra toasted. To rebuilding, I replied. Our glasses touched, and this time we meant it. The civil case ended in victory. Teresa's property was seized and restitution distributed. My portion came to $87,000. Damages, emotional toll, and costs covered. I deposited it into our joint account, the one Sandra never realized I'd kept. Moving forward meant forgiving without erasing. Choosing each other even when it hurt. Piecing together something new from what nearly collapsed. But we weren't perfect. We still clashed. Sandra still scanned exits in restaurants, instincts alive. I still felt uneasy when she was late. Dr. Morrison had warned us. Healing isn't linear. Bad days, setbacks, triggers. The goal isn't perfection. It's choosing each other. 1 year after the fake cops, we held a barbecue. Everyone showed, even families who'd bought Teresa's foreclosed homes at fair market price. Mrs. Rodriguez brought salsa. The Johnsons reunited. The Patel's son's health had returned. Speech, someone yelled. Sandra looked at me. I nodded. She stood on the deck. Once a symbol of everything wrong, now of survival. A year ago, I thought justice and marriage were separate. I was wrong. The truest justice is building something good from something awful. Making community out of chaos. That's what we've done together. She looked at me, then at all of us. The applause was real. Healing wasn't finished, but we were working on it. Sometimes, effort alone is enough. Maybe when she's older, I said. For now, let her believe Grandma's just a cool detective. Sandra leaned closer. I was cool, wasn't I? That wrist lock on Tony. Definitely. Cool. Terrifying cool. Hot cool. She laughed, the sound drifting over a yard filled with neighbors and second chances. The sun dipped behind Maple Ridge, casting the same golden glow as the day I built the deck, the day everything shifted. Or maybe nothing shifted at all. Maybe it only revealed what had always been there. A community worth guarding, a marriage worth saving, justice worth chasing. Sandra's phone buzzed. Another case. She silenced it without a glance. Not worth it, she said, threading her fingers through mine. Never was. On that same deck, once a symbol of chaos, now of survival, we stood surrounded by those we'd helped, and those who had helped us. Teresa remained behind bars. Michael was rebuilding. The victims were healing. The neighborhood flourished. And we were still here, still married, still choosing each other in spite of everything that tried to pull us apart. Happy anniversary, Sandra whispered. The date itself was still months away, but I knew every day we endured was an anniversary now. Each sunset reminded me that love, like justice, requires sacrifice. Happy anniversary, I whispered back. The deck held firm beneath us. We held firm, too, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.